In this video, we are talking about how to build a productivity system, and the first question to start with is, why do you in fact need a productivity system? And really the main reason is so that we can do the stuff that we want to do, we can do things that are meaningful to us in an efficient way without wasting our time, and so that we're less stressed out doing it, because then we don't have to rely on our brain to do things that it's not designed to do. And we can almost think of this as like a bit of a Venn diagram where we've got the brain and we've got our system. And broadly, we can categorize tasks into one of three things. So type 1 tasks are things that our brain itself does best. This is things like creativity and enjoyment and relaxing and living in the present moment and all that fun stuff, connecting with other people, all of this stuff. Totally cool if our brain does the thing. Then we've got type 2 types of thing, which is stuff that like we often use our brain for, but that our productivity system or some kind of system can probably do a little bit more efficiently. For example, things like keeping on top of tasks, keeping on top of calendars, keeping on top of emails. Having to use our brain to remember all of that stuff is really taxing and quite stressful, especially if you have a lot of stuff to be doing. And then thirdly, there is the type 3 stuff, the stuff that we definitely should be using some kind of system for. This generally involves kind of remembering information that is not directly connected to the things we actually care about. So for example, memorizing phone numbers is a bit of a waste of time. In a way, memorizing a lot of people's birthdays, a bit of a waste of time. You can just outsource that to a system like a calendar. And so really the idea of a productivity system is, well, productivity is using our time intentionally and effectively. And so the point of having a system for it is so that our brain doesn't have to do so much work. So anyway, in this video, we're going to talk about kind of 3 different layers of a productivity system that you can choose to build if you feel that it helps you with your life. It certainly helps with mine. And we're going to split that into layer 1, which is Ron, layer 2, which is Hermione, and layer 3, which is Dumbledore. So the Ron layer, i.e. layer 1 of the system, is all about keeping your life in order. And there are really 4 different components that you need in a productivity system, in my humble opinion, to kind of get to a place where your life is reasonably in order.
Let the feast begin.
The first one is a calendar. Now, it is amazing how many people I know who don't live their lives based on a calendar and who are trying to remember in their own heads all of the information for like events that they need to attend. A friend invites you for a birthday party 2 weeks from now. Oh, it's cool, it's fine. I won't write it down. I will just try and remember. Oh, I've got to have dinner with my mum next week. It's fine, I'm just gonna remember. Like, our brain is so bad at remembering these things. And one of the quotes that I always come back to is from David Allen, who is one of the world's biggest productivity gurus, who says that your brain is for having ideas, not for storing them. And one of the principles of productivity that I always come back to, and I have done over the last 5 years, is that my brain is a dumbass. I want my brain to not have to remember things that it doesn't need to. So feel free to use a physical calendar if you really want to, but basically everyone in the world these days uses some kind of digital calendar, usually some kind of app on your phone. Apple Calendar is good, Google Calendar is good. There are a bunch of different third-party alternatives. The one I personally use is Fantastical. This is, for example, what my Fantastical looks like. Earlier today, breakfast with Osama and Shireen at Dishoom, same page meeting with Angus, table read for this video, podcast Q&A for the podcast, video filming, and then I'm going to Cambridge for some talks this evening. I have an orthodontist appointment tomorrow. I've got this whole retreat thing that I'm going to in the evening. And basically for the last several years, I have been running my life based on my calendar. And this is amazing. This like takes an enormous amount of stress off my shoulders, because if something is not in the calendar, then it doesn't exist. Like as soon as a friend says to me, hey, do you want to do this thing on this date? I look at my calendar and be like, let me have a look. Yep. And I'll just add it there and then, so that I'm not trying to remember like, what was that thing that like Catherine invited me to, etc., etc. So a calendar is really good for remembering stuff that you need to do, but it's also really good for actively, intentionally blocking out time for the things that you actually want to do. So for example, for me, I know that every morning I want to block out 3 hours to work on my book. And so those are blocked out in my calendar. And then I know that, oh, okay, cool. When I get to the morning at 9 o'clock, this is the thing that I'm doing. I block out times for exercise. I block out times for sports events, for social events. Friday nights, I want to host a dinner. Therefore, I'll block that time out in my calendar. And then the third and final really good reason to use a calendar is that you can then use automatic scheduling apps like Calendly or TinyCal or SavvyCal or any of these others. And what that does is it generates a link, and that link connects to your calendar. And then if you want to arrange a meeting with someone or a Zoom call with someone you met on the internet, or even a hangout with friends, you could, if you wanted to, save the whole back and forth of scheduling, especially if it's with email, especially if it's a work thing, by just sending them a Calendly link. And then they'd be able to kind of book a time in your calendar. Now, I use this a lot for kind of booking interviews for book research and all this kind of stuff. And it's just super, super helpful, and it saves a lot of time. And again, means that my own brain doesn't have to kind of do the work in arranging all these things. All right, the next thing every productivity system needs at the Ron level is some kind of system for email management. Most of us use something like Gmail, that's totally fine. You can use an app like Apple Mail. I use an app called Superhuman, which is very good, but it's expensive. You have to pay for it, but it's pretty solid. Now, there's an approach to email that I really like from my friend Tiago Forte, who is, again, productivity expert, and it's called One Touch to Inbox Zero. And basically the idea behind this method is that every email touches your inbox only once. If it's something that requires a calendar event, then it goes into your calendar. calendar, and then you archive the email. If it's a to-do, if it's something that needs action, it goes into your task manager, more on that in a minute, and then you archive the email. If it's information that you need to reference at some point, you put it into your note-taking app. And if it's an article or something that you might want to read, it goes into your Read It Later app, and we'll talk much more about those further in the video. There's a few general tips that apply to emails as well, which again are completely game-changing for productivity if you haven't done them already. The first one is to just unsubscribe from all these random emails like Amazon or like sales or like shops, and like all of this stuff is pretty unnecessary. We don't want to treat our inbox like kind of this place where any kind of marketer from any kind of company can just spam stuff into it. One thing that you can actually do, and this is what I do, is that I've created a smart filter in Gmail which searches the content of every email for the word unsubscribe. Now, if the word unsubscribe is in an email, it is probably not an important email because no real person is going to email you with the word unsubscribe in their thing. Whereas if you're getting like a marketing communication or a newsletter or whatever, and it has the word unsubscribe in it, you can just automatically make it skip your inbox so it doesn't kind of clog up the inbox. The other thing you should do is that ideally only have one place to deal with all your email. So for example, when I was at university, I forwarded all my university email to my personal Gmail and also all my personal Gmail to my personal Gmail because Gmail has just way better features than whatever Hermes app that Cambridge University was using. But really the main point is that we want to avoid using our inbox, our email inbox, as a place to find articles to read, or even worse, using our email inbox as a to-do list, which brings us on to component number 3 of a decent productivity system, and that is to have some kind of to-do list. Now again, David Allen's advice from Getting Things Done comes in here. Your brain is for having ideas, not for holding them. And if you don't write something down in a to-do list, your brain is very unlikely to remember the thing. You could do this on pen and paper if you really want to. I sometimes do. Like my daily planner, I use my Essentially Productivity, part-time productivity notebook, and in that, I ask myself one question, which is what is the most important thing I need to do today? That's my daily highlight. And every day I try and fill the end to be like, okay, today, the single most important thing I want to do is X. And then I have a might do list. This is just stuff that I might do later in the day. And I like calling it a might do list because it just takes a little bit of the pressure off me. And it means I don't have to stress too much if I don't get all those things done. So that tends to be what I do on a kind of day by day basis when I figure out what am I doing for the day. But the actual app that I use to track all of the other stuff is Todoist. I've tried a bunch of different apps over the years. So essentially what I do is that if I need to add a task to my to-do list, then usually I'll input it on my phone or on my MacBook if I happen to be on my MacBook. And you'll see on my iPhone that I've literally got Todoist as like one of the primary things in my dock. So if I do think of anything at all, anytime a task pops into my mind, I think, okay, this is not going to happen until I write it down. And I just open up Todoist and I write down whatever the task is. So for example, I know right now I need to find bow tie from Cambridge Flat. Cool, now that's written down. Now I will get to it at some point. Similarly, I use this for shopping lists. I use it for any thank you emails I need to send. As soon as anything pops into mind, it just goes straight into the to-do list app, either on my phone or on my MacBook. And then whenever I've got some time where I feel like, you know what, I'm gonna batch go through my to-do list because I've got half an hour and nothing better to do, then I'll just go through and just bang, 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 bang. I'll delete the ones that are no longer relevant, like, oh, should I get all plant smoothies? Probably, maybe not, screw it, doesn't need to go. I'll just take that off or delete it. But for something I actually need to do, it's great because then I can batch do these things. Like I need to send a bunch of thank you emails, and so I've just batched them all into Todoist, knowing that at some point I will get around to sending all these emails in one go. Something I like to do is sort of got this someday maybe list for like, you know, work stuff, someday maybe a list for like personal stuff. These are things I'd like to do at some point. Rollerblading, archery, hunting, glamping, mountain biking, treehouse glamping retreat. All these different things. Like when I have an idea for something cool, I just chuck it into the someday maybe list. This is again a tip from David Allen. And that means that I know at some point when it comes to planning my next holiday, I'll just be able to look at that and think, you know what? The idea of kite surfing sounds pretty cool. Let me Google and figure out where I can potentially go kite surfing. Now at this point, the mistake that the vast majority of people seem to make with their to-do lists, at least from all the people that I've coached in productivity, is actually not having 100% coverage. So for example, if you have a to-do list and it only covers 90% of your things rather than 100%, you're gonna get into one of these problems.
I can't remember what I've forgotten.
So like the point of the to-do list is so that you don't forget things, but if 10% of things are in your brain, you won't know what that 10% is. And so you're always going to be stressed thinking, oh, I know my to-do list has most of the things I need to do, but it doesn't have all the things I need to do. Therefore, I still need to remember my brain to do stuff. And then it just adds this sort of low level tension and stress to every single thing that we do in life. Anyway, the final thing in our RON level of productivity system is some kind of file management system. Again, this is like super basic stuff, but again, there are so many people who I've literally coached in productivity who don't have a decent file management system. Generally, what you want is some kind of cloud storage. Now, the one that I use, even though I'm an Apple fanboy for absolutely everything, I still use Google Drive as my cloud storage system of choice. I've got my personal Google Drive and I've got the business Google Drive and I've got the folders on my Mac. So for example, I can look in my Drive, I can look at all of my business stuff, all of my med school stuff. Let's look at preclinical medicine. Let's look at first year. These are all the notes that I had in first year across all my different subjects. Let's look at home. that's physiology, essays, examples, documents, all of this stuff. It is all in my Google Drive. And my whole life is basically on Google Drive. Photos, memories, files, all of the things on Google Drive, so that if I ever lose my computer, if my hard disk ever goes, if it ever gets stolen, if I want to upgrade computers, it's so easy. I know every single thing is on Google Drive. And these days, like, searching functions and these things are so good that if I know that I need to find a certain file, I'll just search my Google Drive for it because I know it's probably in there somewhere. All right, so that was the RON layer of the productivity system for essential life management, the 4 components that, in my humble opinion, every single person needs to survive in this world that we live in so that your brain is not super stressed out trying to remember all these random details. The next layer up of the productivity system is an optional extra, and this is for people that consume a lot of books.
Honestly, don't you two read?
And this is where the Hermione level of the productivity system comes in. And basically the idea here is that it's a layer above. It's like additional modules that you can add to your basic productivity system if you want, if you consume a lot of media. Media meaning books or audiobooks or podcasts or videos or anything like that that you might want to remember later. This layer of the productivity system is about taking notes. It's about capturing information that resonates with us from the stuff that we consume. And again, this is for people who, if you've had that feeling where you read all these things or you listen to all these things and you have all these insights, but you don't write them down. And then like 2 months later, you've forgotten what you read in that book that potentially changed your life. That's the point of this level of the productivity system. And here we have another 4 modules of the system. So the first one is the Kindle app. Yes, there are other ways to read. There's Apple Books and stuff, but like, to be honest, I've tested them all and I found the Kindle app to be by far the best one. You don't even need to have a physical Kindle, although that's one of the most life-changing products I do recommend. But yeah, the Kindle app is absolutely sick. I tend to read most things on ebook format rather than physical book format, but it's not just reading that I can do on the Kindle app, it is also highlighting. And highlighting on the Kindle app just is an absolute breeze. And what I can do is that once I've read a book, I can always look at my highlights in the Kindle notebook. And then if I need to revisit things that I learned from a book or a quote from a paranormal romance book that I particularly enjoyed, I can just open up my highlights and I can see everything that's previously resonated with me. All right, so that was the Kindle app. Next, we have a Read It Later app. Now, the one that I've been using for the last several years is called Instapaper. It's free. And essentially the point of Instapaper is that anytime you're reading something or you want to read an article on the internet, if you don't want to read it there and then on your phone or on your browser, you can just share it into something like Instapaper, and then it will just show up on your list. And now, again, when I have a spare moment, if I'm commuting, if I'm on a tube or whatever, I'll just open up Instapaper, usually on my phone, and I'll just flick through some of the articles in Instapaper and I'll be like, oh, okay, cool, this one looks interesting. Improving ourselves to death. This is a bit of a critique about self-help. And I can look through that article, I can highlight stuff as well. It's all very handy. And it's just a great way of separating the reading of articles from coming across the articles. Because often I find that, if I'm on the toilet for like 3 minutes and I'm scrolling through Twitter and I come across an interesting article, if I read it there and then, it might take 10 minutes and then I'm on the toilet for 3 hours and that's not very good. Or if I'm in the middle of something and someone recommends an article, I know I want to read it at some point, but I know I don't want to read it there and then. I'll just send it straight to Instapaper and trust that at some point I will get around to reading that article. And again, this separation of things, like if I'm trying to focus on something that I genuinely care about, but then I get derailed by an article recommendation and go down this Wikipedia rabbit holes trying to figure out all these conspiracy theories, that ends up actually taking time away from the thing that I actually care about and kind of stopping me from kind of being productive and being intentional with how I'm spending my time. And because time is our most valuable non-renewable resource, it's the only thing we can't make more of. It's like, it always felt a bit like, I know I've carved out this time to work on this thing that's important to me, but I've just been stolen away by being distracted by this article. Instapaper or something like that completely solves that problem. Now, when it comes to actually finding articles and interesting things to read that will level up your life and like things you actually care about, people always ask me like, how do you find stuff to read? And for me, it's because I subscribe to a bunch of email newsletters, and one of the main ones that I read every single day is called Morning Brew, who are very kindly sponsoring this video. Now, Morning Brew is a completely free daily email newsletter that lands in your inbox every morning or in your Read It Later app if you've set up a forwarding rule, which is what I've done. Basically, it gets you up to speed on what's happening in the world of tech and finance and business. And if you care about those 3 things like I do, then it's just a fantastic newsletter, and it's also completely free, so you might as well sign up. It takes most people around 5 minutes to go through it and catch up to date with the news. Usually I skim through it in about 2.5 minutes flat while I'm waiting for my morning coffee to brew. And if there's any interesting articles from that, I'll send those articles directly to my Read It Later app as well, and then usually read them later on in the day on the toilet. And that means every day I'm up to date on these things that I care about, like tech and finance and business. And a lot of those topics then generate interesting content ideas that I can talk about in the podcast or in YouTube videos or in anything else, or just generally keeping up to date with interesting things in the world. It's also great because it gives you interesting and in-depth coverage around weird things like Elon Musk, how he's financing his Twitter buy, or like the recent crypto crash, which has massively affected my own crypto portfolio. But I've gotten the information from Morning Brew because I trust them as a legit, non-fake news source. And all it is take out a few minutes out of my day to read these interesting articles rather than be keeping up to date with the whole 24 hours news cycle. So yeah, if you're interested in tech, finance, business, any of that kind of stuff, then you might as well subscribe to this newsletter. It is completely free. They don't charge a single penny for it. Completely free. Check out the link in the video description, and it'll help support the channel as well. So thank you so much, Morning Brew, for sponsoring this video and for making my personal life much better. All right, component 3 of the Hermione layer is an app called Readwise. I'll put an affiliate link down below. They're not sponsoring this video, but if you click the link, you'll get an extra 2-month trial rather than just a 1-month trial, and I'll get a bit of a kickback if you sign up. I've been recommending Readwise for the last like 3 years now. Readwise is incredible. It's like this little hub that takes in details, like it takes in your Kindle highlights and your Instapaper highlights and a few other sources, and it puts them all in one place. And it means you can then export those highlights to apps like Notion or Roam, more on those in layer 3. And it's really handy because now all of this stuff gets automated. Anytime I see a passage in Kindle or an Instapaper that resonates with me, where I think, ooh, I want to save this passage, all I have to do is highlight it. And I just trust that Readwise will behind the scenes sort it all out. Again, before Readwise existed, before we had this kind of thing, what we'd have to do is if you found a passage that resonated with you, you'd have to write it down, you have to highlight it, you'd have to store it somewhere, you have to figure out where you're trying to store it. It becomes a real faff. And again, coming back to a point, what is the point of a productivity system? People always ask, it's to get shit off of your own brain. Like, I now don't need to remember all these things because the system is remembering it for me. And then I trust that the system will resurface it as and when I need to access those highlights again. And then finally, the fourth component of this sort of system is some sort of capture app for notes. Now, again, I've tried a bunch of systems over the years, but actually the one that I've come back to most often is actually Apple Notes. And essentially, anytime I need to remember something, for example, if I'm taking a note while I'm on the toilet, or if I'm on the train and listening to an audiobook and I want to take notes on something, I'll just open up Apple Notes and I'll write it down. And I'll trust that if I need to resurface that thing sometime further down the line, it will always be in my Apple Notes, and it will always be something that I could potentially search for. At this point, honestly, I've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of notes in my Apple Notes, and then I just trust that they're there. Like, I know I don't need to worry about doing stuff with them as soon as they come in. I don't need to worry about an elaborate system for this. What I care about is having the minimum viable level of organization, the minimum viable level of systems and structure to, again, reduce my own strain, reduce my own stress. People often ask, like, oh, how do you seem to not burn out? How do you manage? Like, honestly, like, having a decent system is a massive cure for burnout because you just trust the system, you trust the system to do stuff, you don't have to, again, have that low level of anxiety running in your actual brain. All right, so that was the Hermione layer of the productivity system, and now the final layer that if you want to layer on top of that, you can, if you really want to, is the Dumbledore layer, which relates to a concept called building a second brain. You might have heard me talk about building a second brain before. It is a book, it is a system, it's a course written and done by my friend Tiago Forte, and it's like a pretty game-changing productivity system because the idea, like level 1, the Ron layer, level whatever you want to call it, was about just being able to organize our life and kind of get by. Level 2 was about capturing insights from all the stuff that we read and consume. And level 3, this Dumbledore level, is all about making connections and in a way using our productivity system for creativity rather than just for storage. And in a way, if you can actually build your own second brain, this ends up acting as a thought partner for you. I've been using this system since like mid 2019 now. It's been 3 years, and I've found so many ways in which, particularly for writing my book, but also for creating content and for writing newsletters and for doing podcasts, the information I've captured into my second brain using an app called Roam, it's the one I use these days, although I might switch to Obsidian, more on that later, but capturing all this information into an app called Roam Research means that it just sort of resurfaces. And if you want to find out more about this Dumbledore level, then check out this video over here, which is my book club episode all about breaking down the CODE component of the building a second brain system, and that will give you a step-by-step guide on how to apply it in your own life. So thank you so much for watching. Check out this video over here, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.